I think your mic is muted, maybe.
All right, we'll try that again.
There we go.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you for joining us for the March 8th regular Planning Commission meeting. It is 6 o'clock, and let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with a roll call attendance, please.
Commissioner Stevens?
Here.
Commissioner Bedoya, I'm sorry.
Here.
Commissioner Black? Vice Chair Calindres? Chairman Smith?
Here. All right, if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Stevens?
Yes, hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. That'll start with me. All right, do we have any adjustments to the agenda tonight?
No, sir.
Do we have any conflicts of interest to disclose tonight? All right, we will open the public comment period. This meeting will be open to the public and conducted in a virtual format to be inclusive of all participation preferences. Public comment participation is encouraged by emailing any comments to the city clerk's office or by calling in and using the phone number provided on the front of the agenda. Do we have any public comments tonight?
I have no written comments. Heather, do we have anyone on the line? Heather, can you hear us? Do we have anyone on the line?
Sorry about that, Nicole. My phone was not working. Are you on public comment?
Yes, ma'am. Do we have any callers?
I do. I have one. Her name is Catherine, and I'll put her through.
Okay, thank you. Caller, can you hear us?
Yes, hi.
Okay, go right ahead.
Hi, Planning Commission. My name is Catherine Brzezowski. I'm baffled that the Planning Commission has not spoken about your housing element at any recent meetings. Your last presentation indicated you would be presenting a subsequent draft to the public in October. There would be a Planning Commission hearing in November and potentially adoption by City Council in December. In fact, you've missed each of those targets and deadlines. Your Community Development Director has an opportunity to speak at each of these Planning Commission meetings about upcoming opportunities. She continues to make no reference to your sixth housing element being past due, and she should be speaking about it at every single meeting. You've missed the state's deadline of October 15th. You also missed the state's no penalty extension through to February 15th. The city of Beaumont is now in violation of state law. Beaumont is newly ineligible for state funding because of the lack of work of this committee. At what point will a housing element be discussed? I've followed every aspect advised by your process. I've spoken to the Planning Commission meetings. I've spoken to City Council. I participated in the housing element questionnaires given to the public. I've also had lengthy conversations with Chelsea Lee with the state HCD department. As I've shared with staff, Beaumont's faulty process has the attention of my state senator, and concerns are known directly by the state HCD director. I would think you would want to do better. When will you be stepping into this process, Planning Commission? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Heather, do we have any other callers?
I have no other callers.
Thank you.
With no one in the room, we'll move on to our action items. Item number 1 is approval of the minutes. Do we have any requests to speak on this matter? Or any comments from the committee? No. Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve the minutes from February 22nd, 2022.
With a motion and a second, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Before I do roll call, I'll just notate that Commissioner Black is now on Zoom as of 6:04.
Okay, thank
I'll
you.
do roll call. Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Bedoya?
Yes.
Commissioner Black?
Yes.
Chairman Smith?
Yes. Item number 2, public hearing and consideration of an ordinance establishing Beaumont Municipal Code, Chapter 5.72, food trucks. Can we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Before you tonight is a public hearing and request for consideration of an ordinance to establish Chapter 5.72 of the Beaumont Municipal Code, food trucks. So this item has been discussed previously at City Council in both December and in February. Staff took direction from Council and has crafted this draft ordinance that's before you tonight. This ordinance is for regulating food trucks and other motorized mobile food vendors, not for the street vendors, the non-motorized vendors that are governed by SB 946. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that up front. The vendors that you're seeing now are typically non-motorized. Even if they have a big setup, they're not driving a food truck or hauling a smoker or doing anything like that. So this is intended to regulate the motorized mobile food vendors. There's a whole series of items that have been discussed with council, and what I've done, if it's okay with you, Chairman, is I actually have a little PowerPoint that's going to walk through each section of the ordinance, and I think that's probably the best way to digest it.
Please, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't have a mouse, Nicole. This computer is like,
I have one.
oh no, there it goes. Okay, I found it. Sorry, just the arrow wasn't picking up. Okay.
I have one if you need.
Okay, we're good. Let's see. Okay. Is it possible to show this on the screen?
Yeah, it's showing now.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So this is a new chapter to the Beaumont Municipal Code, and we are calling it the Food Truck Ordinance. Chapter 5.72 would have the purpose of regulating, as I stated, motorized mobile food vendors in a manner that we could enjoy non-traditional food options, but still maintaining public health, safety, and welfare. So the key purposes of this ordinance are to make sure that there's no interference with public safety, to make sure that these vendors operate with safety of pedestrians and vehicular traffic in mind, to make sure that the food that is sold is done so safely and in compliance with health department standards, and then to prevent and avoid any unsanitary conditions, trash or debris and things like that. And then lastly, to ensure reasonable access and use of the public right-of-way by both the vendors as well as the citizens. So there are a number of sections in the ordinance. It starts out with the purpose and intent, which we just covered, and then moves on to definitions, permits and licenses that are required, the health department permitting. Then we have some general operational standards, which would apply across the board. We also have some specific standards that would cover food trucks operating on private property, and then some specific standards to food trucks operating in the public right-of-way. Of course, there are fees that would have to be established or addressed, the term and renewal process for these permits, and then what happens if there is a violation and we need to move through the revocation and appeal process. So firstly, I'm not going to give you all the definitions because there are so many and you can see them in the staff report. But basically the intent of having definitions in the code is to make sure that there's consistency and clarity for both the applicants and staff when we're looking at, what we're talking about in the ordinance. So what is a food truck? What is a public right-of-way? What do these different aspects of this ordinance mean? Many of these definitions are already contained in the municipal code and were pulled from there. Ones that were not in the municipal code were pulled from other reliable sources, whether it be dictionary or other municipal codes, and then run through the city attorney's office, as needed. So we will have consistent language to work with in the code. So next we move to permits and licenses that are required. So there are a number of items that council wanted addressed in the ordinance. And of course, we needed to ensure that the operators would have a business license, just like any other business would have in the city, whether it's a restaurant or a beauty salon or anything like that. We also do require business license of the street vendors, the vendors covered under SB 946. They do have a vendor license that they're required to obtain as well. So we're equitably applying this, provision across the board. We have developed a separate food truck permit, and this is a permit application that basically addresses items specific to what is required in this code. So I believe there is a copy of that attached to your staff report here, and I didn't include it in this, so you already have it, but if anyone has looked at that and has questions, we can discuss that as well. But that allows staff to look specifically at the food truck operation as it will occur in the city. Part of that application process is providing a health department approval. So the food truck operators, when they submit their business license and their food truck permit application, they're going to be required to submit their health department approval to show that they have been through, their food truck has been through the inspections with the county health department and have passed and received their proper paperwork to show that they can operate legally. Council was also pretty intent on making sure that these businesses were paying taxes as appropriate. And so we are requiring that they have proof of a seller's permit as well. So the state, when you apply for a seller's permit, issues paperwork accordingly. And so they'll provide us a copy of that with it, showing that they are paying their sales tax.
I have a quick question on that.
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind interruptions.
No, go for it.
Since they're mobile, how is it determined what sales are happening in which jurisdiction?
So when they fill out the business license, they have to put their gross receipts down. And then we also, on the food truck permit, have the dates of operation, or requesting dates of operation that they'll be in the city. And so although it will be a little bit labor intensive to track down initially, it will give us enough information to look at the sales tax reports that come in quarterly that we get like from HDL and whatnot. And then be able to go back and look and see, okay, are they reporting, do they have us listed as a sub-location, which I think that is an option on some of the seller's permits, depending on how they're set up and whatnot. So this is sort of it's a new process for all of us, right? But this is the tool we have, and then we'll have to sort of go back and look quarterly at, okay, did we get reports from these permits that we had in the city? And if not, then we can call and be like, hey,
Got it.
did you sell nothing while you were here, or did you, whatever.
Right.
So it'll be a little bit of an honesty, also on their end. But I'm thinking if they have a seller's permit, they're reporting in some regard anyway. So.
Thank you.
And then lastly, proof of liability insurance. And the city's minimum is a $1 million policy that covers a number of items, and those are listed specifically in the ordinance. And so then we move on to specific health department requirements. So in addition to the health department permit being required, it has to be visible on the vehicle or at the location at all times. Staff is going to initiate quarterly inspections of the food trucks, and this will happen on sort of a random basis as we see when they're operating within the city, what they've put on their permit. It will be likely code enforcement and fire, because both of them have an interest in their respective codes to make sure that these types of businesses are compliant. And so we will set up a process where they will go out, at random times based on the permits that we have active within the city to make sure that their health department approvals are visible, their business license is current, and all the other things. And then this also came out of discussion at council, which is more than 3 reports of foodborne illness would be grounds for revocation. And so granted, they would have to report to us, or we will have to periodically check with County of Riverside Environmental Health, where they take reports of foodborne illness. But that was important to make sure that these vendors are operating, in compliance with county health regulations and that they're serving food safely.
Is that consistent with brick and mortar restaurants too?
So that, we don't have anything in the code specific to brick and mortar restaurants as far as operational guidelines. This would be specific to Beaumont. And so it would pertain only to the food trucks here.
Who would validate the complaint?
So we would, if the complaint came into us, we would ask if they've also visited county health, where that's typically the reports of foodborne illness go through. And then I don't know that we would be able to necessarily substantiate it other than just if we're getting numerous calls on the same vehicle at a time. But we'd work with county health at that point if it was an ongoing issue.
I had a question as well.
Yes.
Is there a county health dictate as far as reports and reporting? And if not, are there other cities that have that, the grounds for revocation? And are we consistent with them? How did we come upon 3?
So
I guess my question.
3 was a number that actually came out at council. There are other ordinances, and I would have to look and provide you the specific cities that I looked at, but there were a few that had a similar type of guideline that if there were multiple reports of foodborne illness, then the permitting or the license, depending on what city it was, could be revisited. I am not sure what county health does with that, but that's easy to find out. We can reach out to our contacts there and find out what county health does if there are reports of foodborne illness, repeated reports.
Yes, I think we need to have that information before we put a number on that, because I don't want it to be too high, and to be fair, I don't want it to be too low. It should be consistent with neighboring cities and as well as, and mostly with county health.
Got it.
County and state health.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right. So then after we move through the permitting aspect of the ordinance, we are on to general operational standards. So these are standards that apply to food trucks across the board in the city, whether you're operating in the public right-of-way or whether you're operating on private property. And so some of the highlights are not operating in residential neighborhoods, not operating within 1 block of an existing brick and mortar restaurant, another food truck event, unless you're part of that event, and a school or park. And these were pretty common themes throughout all of the food truck ordinances that we looked through. Almost every jurisdiction somehow addressed these issues. And I think understandably so when it comes to other restaurants, right, or other food truck operators. Schools and parks, the distances varied. The reason we went with 1 block instead of like 100 feet or 200 feet is because 1 block is much easier to measure for both, a common person and even code enforcement officer or staff person having to go out instead of having to take your wheel and wheel it off and see if you're at 100 feet. So a block is something that people can sort of relate to and understand as a general unit of measurement. Another standard would be not operating on an undeveloped lot without a permit. Hours of operation from 6 a.m. to midnight, and that is inclusive of setup and takedown. So setup would not begin before 6 a.m. Takedown should not occur after midnight. Yes, sir.
So would this, 2 questions. Would this apply in the gated communities And the other one was, sometimes I know at my kids' school, they would have food trucks there. So would that be just a special event?
So
Or
school-
they wouldn't get, they couldn't do it?
Schools can do whatever they want. So schools actually do not fall under the jurisdiction of the city. We don't have like zoning regulations necessarily that we enforce on school district property. So if a school district wanted to, or a school site wanted to bring on, I know a lot of them do the snow cone trucks or the in and out trucks or whatever, they run through their own process on that. So we would not interfere with that. As far as in the gated communities, most of the time the gated communities have HOAs, and the HOAs handle the special event processing with planning staff. And so they would then go through the special event permit depending on the nature of what they were doing. So we would apply the standards. So if they have a food truck coming in, they would need to be licensed and doing all of the things that we would require of a food truck. But the HOA would then be the one that would process the application through and have the authority to allow them to operate inside the gates or whatever. Okay. Compliance with noise ordinance and dark sky. So both of those I know are important here in the city. And so we specifically called out the noise ordinance, and as far as lighting goes, there is no additional lighting that is allowed to occur with the food truck except for what it takes to operate and cook in the kitchen and illuminate the menu and whatnot. So no extra flashing lights, no, lights on stands or anything like that. It's what you need that's contained within your operation. No sales or service of alcohol, and then a food truck operation must provide trash and recycling containers, and then remove them and to properly dispose of the trash when they leave. And then also,
Does that include compost as well?
so that's come up and has yet to be determined. If we're required through our Cal Recycle requirements to have composting or the organics waste bin, then yes, it would be required as well. As of now, trash and recycling is what we know has to occur until we get further direction on that. And the proper disposal of, we refer to it as fog, fats, oil, and grease, and that would be provided through either a disposal receipt, a pump and haul, or a drop-off ticket. Any number of those, or any method of that would be acceptable to staff to ensure that the fogs are not being dumped down the city sewer directly into our wastewater system. So in that, we will also require either an agreement, if they're operating somewhere else, an agreement from a current disposal process they have, or require them to set up something on a contract before we would issue a permit to them. And this is a big deal just because of all the work the city has done with the new wastewater treatment plant and all of the current mandates that we're under to make sure we stay compliant. So then we have a few additional operational standards specific to whether a food truck operates on private property or whether they would operate in the right-of-way. And so obviously having the permit and the license, if they're operating on a private property, they must park their food truck on paved portions of the lot. And I know that sounds odd, but there are lots throughout town that are, maybe not fully improved, partially improved. And so we want to ensure that the vehicle is parked on paved portions of the lot, and that's basically because if we have anything dripping or leaking or whatever, we don't want that to leach and have a contamination issue or anything like that of either the ground or the water. And a minimum, if they're operating at a business, a minimum of 2 on-site parking spaces must be provided for people who would come on and take the food, but these would need to be unencumbered parking spaces, so meaning not also needed for the existing business during the course of their daily operations. So we want to make sure that we're not creating an issue on the street or, with cars backing up coming into a parking lot. And we've seen a little bit of that on 6th Street periodically with some of the other pop-up vendors. And so we want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for that with allowing operations on private property without providing adequate parking. And then no overnight parking of food trucks on a vending site, so it can't be used as storage. The food truck has to leave at the end of the day, and then if they're going to come back, they come back. And then uncovered seating may be provided on private property to accommodate guests that might be wanting to sit and eat. Or if it's for a special event, someone brings in the food truck to cater for their employees, obviously that would apply as well. And then in the right-of-way, the food trucks must operate in a legal parking space, whether that's curb or, regular pull-in parking or anything like that. Sidewalk adjacent for service, and that makes sense because you don't want people in the street or, having any issues where there may be some pedestrian and vehicle interaction. And then same thing with no street side food service. So same thing is to try and keep the pedestrians safe and make sure that the food trucks are parked in a location that's suitable for having people coming and going and purchasing their goods. And then no on-site seating, take and go only, and then limited to 4 hours per day on the same block. So they can set up, prep, serve, go, and then come back to the same spot the next day, but you can't be camped out there for 8 hours a day, Any questions on these ones? No?
I have a list, but maybe after the
Tackle it at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, sure thing. I know it's kind of a lot, so, Then we move on to the licenses and fees and whatnot. So business license fees are application-based. So depending on how they fill out their business license will depend on what their fee is established. So is it gross receipts or is it categorized somehow differently? There's a number of categories. There's a couple different categories that a food truck could fit into. So their business license fees would be determined based on that. A food truck permit is based on staff review time until we have a fee established for this. So what we're doing right now is we have the ability in the fee schedule to just tabulate the cost of what it would take to process an application, right? So if I get a food truck permit in, I'm going to log my time. How much time do I spend reviewing this? And then there's a dollar amount assigned to that, and you just do the math on it, and that's what it ends up being. We have the ability to then generate an invoice that shows the itemized time that was spent, so it's a fair accounting of the cost to process that. And the goal with that is just to make sure we have cost recovery in the amount of staff time that's spent with it. If we go through this and then it's determined that, it's way too high, or, maybe it's a lot less than we thought it would be, right? Then we can look at, in the fees, there's a fee study currently taking place right now in the city for updating the fees, and I think 2023 is when it will take effect. We would be able to then look at establishing a fee if necessary, in that fee schedule that would just be a set amount for this type of permit. But we've kind of got to fill out what it is because there's not really a good gauge on how long it will take. It's not an overly complex application, but again, each location is sort of case by case. So, and our special event permits are a no-charge service to the community. So we couldn't even look at that, which is a similar type of application, to base it off of. So business licenses do have to be renewed each year by July 1st. And then food truck permit would be, the renewal would be subject to whatever was presented at the time that the permit was issued. So if they're requesting, their dates for the whole year, then we would, then connect it with the business license, and then they would have to submit for a renewal. When they submit for their business license renewal, on their food truck permit. If they, if they're only going to be here for, periodic times throughout the year, they can also list that, and then we can validate the permit based on their times that they would like to operate within the city. So we're going to work with the individual applicants on their needs for that at the time, where business license is basically July 1 to June 30. So revocation, we talked about the foodborne illness, and I have taken down the comments on those. Other issues, just for point of discussion, falsification of information, of course, if you're lying about anything on your application, non-compliance with any of the code sections, and then if you are revoked, it is for a period of 12 months before you can come back and apply for a new permit for the food truck. And that is consistent with other revocation procedures in the Beaumont Municipal Code now. There are a few other things in there, but it's like penal code violations and whatnot that PD has for various applications. And then, of course, we always have due process here at the city, so there is an appeal process. The revocation can be appealed to city council, and that pertains to the food truck permit specifically. Both business licenses and special events have their own appeals process already established in the Beaumont Municipal Code, and they are similar to the appeal to council that's presented here. And then lastly, the next steps are tonight having the public hearing and then Planning Commission's recommendation for council. I've already taken some notes to have some comments incorporated, some changes incorporated, and then it will be for a first reading at City Council next week, and that will include the comments that Commission provides this evening. And then if council does approve the first reading on the 15th, it will be at the second reading, which would take place April 5th. And then the ordinance takes effect, as all ordinances do, 30 days after they're approved if there's no appeal. So that concludes the presentation. Planning Department always welcomes input, not just from Commission, but from the general public. So we'll open it up for discussion here at the chairman's discretion, but for anybody watching, feel free to email or call the Planning Department directly with your input between now and next Tuesday, and we will include your comments for the record at the next hearing.
All right, thank you. With commission discussion, I'll start Commissioner Stevens.
Sure. Thank you. The last question was already answered April 5th, and then 30 days after that for implementation. On this would be 5.72.060 general operation standards for food trucks on page 10.
Okay.
And number 12 is no sales or service of alcohol shall be permitted. There are wine trucks and wine, mobile. Is that included in the special event? So if you have a special event and you want a wine truck, is it not allowed?
So special event, this talks about if you're part of a special event, then the provisions of that special event then are what you're part of, right? So like the canopies and tables and chairs, like what happens at Cherry Festival, right? So if someone is part of a big city event, then the provisions of that is going to take precedent. For us, the general service of alcohol from a food truck, not favorably looked upon that much, just because of the regulations with ABC, and then just having food and alcohol in containers that can then be put into a vehicle with someone who's driving and whatnot. It just wasn't something that was high on the list, I suppose. So
even with a roped off section for 21 and over at a
special event, yes, that's different.
special
I
event,
think
yeah.
that's going to be a different situation. I thought you meant just in general. No, but yeah. So
I think most of these concerns that I have are for special events.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
but for a special event, a wine or alcohol sales
Right,
can be.
and I will look through there again and then just make sure that it's clear that if that were to occur, provided they have all their proper ABC licensing, that they can serve alcohol as part of a special event. And then make that recommendation to council.
Right. And we've had, our HOA has had events with a wine cart or trailer. And but that's a special event
Right.
as well.
Okay.
Can I piggyback on that question real
Yes,
quick?
ma'am.
If we are to have a food truck, wine, beer truck, whatever it might be, would the licensing or the permit be different as far as price and required insurances, et cetera?
So no, I don't see that it would require any difference in price or insurance. If alcohol sales or service from a food truck as part of a special event occurred, special events are already required to have insurance in place. And if they are serving alcohol, then the ABC permitting, or if alcohol is being served, ABC has a form they send to the city that advises the city of what's occurring. And so that would happen once the vendors that were serving the alcohol had their, whether it's a catering permit or whether it's a one-day license or whatever permit based on the event that ABC issued, then we would be advised of that. So, and ABC does have a number of permits like that happen. The only ABC licensing we typically deal with here in the city is for the brick and mortar restaurants or someplace like the Craft Lounge where they go through the full-blown conditional use permit approval here with the Planning Commission in order to get their license from the Alcohol Beverage Committee or Commission.
So for all
Okay,
intents
I
and
just want to make
purposes,
sure that we don't put ourselves in a situation where it's going to be more difficult to, for lack of a better word, police and ensure that the safety of the public.
Yeah, understood. And that's precisely why we didn't want to have it just from food trucks serving in the public right of way, because then that does become an issue. But as far as with special events, it happen, there's alcohol service now that occurs and it is included in those special event permit applications.
so for all intents and purposes, a wine truck serving a cherry festival is no different from a vendor serving a cherry festival.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Same requirements.
Yeah, and I'll like I said, I will go through and make sure that that's clear enough because it should be fair, across the board, whether they're serving from a truck or whether they're serving from a tent. If they're at the special event, it should be treated, the same.
I do agree with the statement here that only at special events.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can't imagine PD being very happy with curbside alcohol sales, throughout the city, so.
Mr. Stevens, more questions?
Yeah, a few more. So under the special event umbrella, for instance, would the crosswalks, number 6, would that be looked at for the special event if it's within 40 feet of a crosswalk, for instance?
Yes, and so typically special events take place on private property. So I would not anticipate that would be as much of an issue. That is geared more towards trucks that are going to pull up, and we want to make sure there's clear line of sight for both pedestrians and vehicles, that there's no visual blockage when a person is crossing the street or, anything like that. If there is a business, say like City Hall, that wanted to have a food truck event and we have a crosswalk, out here, we would take into account the layout of the site. It is a different application for the special event. And so they are required to provide a myriad of information like site plan, like layout of the vendors, if they're closing any streets, you know, what that request looks like. Again, same thing with hours of operation, all of those things. So when we look at a special event, we take into account the big picture of what's happening, where it's happening, what time it's happening, and all of those things.
Great. And my only other concern was on 13 with trash and recycling. I know Chairman Smith mentioned organics and that sort of thing, but it seems like trash and recycling has been an issue at special events or otherwise, that every trash can at a park gets filled up in addition to whatever the vendors bring, in addition to the dumpsters that waste management brings, and then they're overflowing, don't get picked up on time, and then the residents decide to dispose of their large items, couches, refrigerators, etc. So is there anything that can be done to, whether it be with waste management, timely removal of trash bins, or providing enough receptacles depending on the size of the event, rather than just maybe one or two, you know, if there's multiple food trucks, something to help mitigate the trash and recycling issue.
Yeah, if we were looking at, well, as we do for any special event, we would look at the whole you know, the whole layout of everything. If it was a strictly food truck event, then obviously this would apply, where each food truck has to have their own receptacles and then take their trash with them when they leave. When we're talking about something different, like the festivals or carnivals or anything like that, the proponents of the event, whether it's an HOA or whether it's a city-sponsored event or whatever, are responsible for ensuring there's enough, you know, receptacles, which obviously sounds like doesn't always occur. As far as waste management's pickup, I can advise our solid waste manager that there are issues with that, and just see if there's anything she can do to help facilitate a better response from them on picking up the dumpsters or the portable disposable trash cans that they bring in for those events, and see if we can work it that way.
I think that's all for now.
All right, Commissioner Bedoya? No, I didn't know. Commissioner Black?
No, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
I have one more, sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. On the business license and renewals, special event or not, does every food truck that comes to for the day that is hired by, or you know, an HOA or the city or whatever, need a City of Beaumont business license?
Yes, and we do have some options for vendors that are only going to operate in the city, say for one day, or for businesses that are not based solely in Beaumont. We have one-day vendor permits that a vendor can get as part of a special event. We have one-day permits that can be issued for say non-city, not like Cherry Festival or those, but say a different type of special event on a private property, a catering event or something where they're going to be here for just the one day. We also have out-of-town business licenses, and both of those types are less expensive than, say, maybe a full business license would be for someone who's operating, you know, just all over town all the time, you know, that are based here in Beaumont. And again, depending on how they're classified also depends on what it costs. So are we doing gross receipts, or are we doing some other category that's allowed by the business license? And then there's just different dollar amounts assigned to each type. So, but for our one-day guys, yeah, there's a one-day permit, or if they're going to come back repeatedly, but they want to get an out-of-town license that'll be good for the whole year, that's an option as well.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking about this one block
Okay.
item, and just kind of thinking right around here, for example. So you got a restaurant, you know, within a block of a restaurant. So McDonald's, Baker's, you know, so nothing in that block. You go to the next blocks, you got Los Mariscos, Then you have a block that's off in front of the Craft Lounge. And then next to that, you have Toscano's and you've got Thai Air. So it pretty much takes Beaumont Avenue, because then you're up into residential areas. So it takes Beaumont Avenue out. If I'm heading towards the freeway, again, between, God, I don't know too many restaurants. This is almost embarrassing. But, with East Wall and the Cornerstone and Ramona's, you're almost to the freeway before you can put any of these in. Is the one block guidance almost too restrictive at that point?
So I guess that's a question for you guys. I mean, I kind of went with what a lot of other cities had done. And a lot of cities were 100 feet, 200 feet, 500 feet from existing restaurants. If we want to recommend to council that we look at downtown differently than other parts of town, I mean, that's something that you could consider doing. It's for staff, it's trying to find the balance of understanding council's concern for existing businesses, but also understanding the desire to allow these other businesses to operate, and trying to find a balance on what is too restrictive or not restrictive enough, maybe in another business's opinions. So
that's just because they're good at it. Because I think when you look at it practically, you've got in front of the antique store over by the freeway, maybe in front of like the Do-Its. I don't know, because Applebee's is across there. Yeah,
they do bring in, and I mean that's across the street. So I mean it could become an issue where they're unable to operate.
For all intents and purposes, they're blocked out from operating anywhere in the city.
Yeah.
So I would think that that's something. I know that for ease, I get it, I understand it, but Second Street Marketplace, that whole area would be out. And then we're kind of pushing people onto residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's, while it's convenient, I'm not sure that it's what's in the best interest. I think that we got enough small ones scattered out that I would say on the same block as, so you have something like that where
So
you
then they
wouldn't
could
be
be
able to
across
park
the
in front of,
street from, or
you wouldn't be able to park in front of Toscano's or Thai Air, but a block down where there's not a restaurant,
right.
that's an area where you might be able to.
Okay.
So I would
not on the same block.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would offer that as a suggestion.
That's a good suggestion. I'm
What
open
if-
to hearing these ideas for sure.
What if we would look at, and I don't know if this is feasible, but what if we would look at the type of food that's offered? So for instance, if it's near, we wouldn't let a Mexican food truck set up near a Mexican restaurant. I don't know if that's a potential, but just a thought that might go into.
So then you get into, are some of these interesting fusion places.
Right. Yeah, I will say that did cross my mind, Commissioner Black, but I'm not familiar enough with the food truck industry to know if these trucks are serving, one distinct kind of food, or, if you watch food TV, then a lot of them are like Chairman Smith said, like fusion restaurants, or, serving multiple kinds of food. And as much as I would love to go and inspect every food truck and see what food they're serving, I think I would not be able to get out and do that as well. But I think it's an idea worth noting as well, just to if there's clearly one predominant type of food being served from this, food truck, then they should not be on the same block as a brick and mortar restaurant serving the same type of food. I mean, I think that's it's worth noting and bringing up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chairman Smith, I really like where you were going with that suggestion, but I lost track. And can it be explained just one more time on that?
So you wouldn't be able to be parked on the same block as a restaurant.
So if you sell Thai food from a Thai truck.
Also, incorporating Commissioner Black's comments on there, someone who's selling Thai food from a Thai truck would be able to park in front of Juan Pollo. I mean, there's terrible parking out there. You want to be able to burn it
Yeah,
out.
I mean, I don't think they actually,
You
well,
know,
Right.
yeah.
but
Okay.
for example,
Okay, okay. Yeah, because I think it is much too restrictive, especially on that Beaumont Avenue, like what you were saying. Definitely agree, but there needs to be something to open it up.
And ideally, downtown is the place where we would want to see this synergy occur.
yes.
So we don't want to make it infeasible for food trucks to operate, because I think that's some of the intent with what council's trying to do in general with the downtown area plan and the businesses and the economic development committee and the work that they're doing. So it's definitely point well taken.
So I reading through the rest of this, I think the rest of it is very well thought out. You know, but I would be comfortable making the recommendation to council for consideration, you know, with these points that we've brought up for their further consideration.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. I will get all of these incorporated and note the discussion that we've had and the recommendation, or when you guys make a recommendation that these changes, and we'll line item out for council so that they understand where they fit in the ordinance and what the discussion was, what the change would be.
Okay. Any further comments?
Yeah, just going on Beaumont Avenue, the issue with the crosswalks might also be very limiting for the food truck vendors. And I don't know if there needs to be an exception on Beaumont Avenue or
The downtown area.
a safety, check prior. But again, I think Beaumont Avenue would be the main concern for how many crosswalks and
You
intersections.
know, 50 feet's really not going to be too difficult. You know, you figure that's 3 cars. So most of the blocks, you're going to have enough room on there, you know, where you should be able to get that 50 feet. And yeah, I prefer it because that way any drivers, they're not going to be surprised by pedestrians that might walk out in a crosswalk. You know, still keeps the vehicle, pedestrian safety, usability, that type of stuff. So I think the 50 feet is doable. You know, it's really not that far of a distance when you think about it.
Okay. I will still make mention of that at council, just discussion we had on the crosswalks, and see if there's the same concerns are shared, or if there's any appetite to address it, you know, whether it's just on Beaumont Avenue or in the downtown in general, or just across the board. Maybe it's, you know, not as much of an issue since we're already have restrictions in place as far as operating adjacent to like schools or parks, which is where you might see more of a concern about people utilizing crosswalks heavily during, you know.
Possibly, but you know, there again, you might have people who are parking on adjacent streets that are walking to a food truck, and then, you know, again, I think that it's you know, I mean, you know, if you look at traffic calming measures, for example, with bulb outs, they're about 50 feet from the intersection, so that you're able to see somebody who's standing there and not just coming out blind. So,
Good
you know,
point. Yep.
I still think that's appropriate.
Okay.
Do we have any other commission discussion? We'll open the public
I
hearing.
was-
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I was wondering if we've had any kind of comments from business owners, from citizens concerning this.
Yes, we have had some interaction. I received some emails over the course of the last 3 months or so that we've been discussing this with council. Most of the folks' input that was given, both at council, we had someone come and speak, and then I've had some emails, has been taken into account with this. The person that came and spoke at council saw the preliminary draft version of what you're looking at today, which was basically the language without numbers assigned and sort of still waiting to be tightened up the rest of the way. And he spoke favorably of that. I'm happy to provide you the comment via email if you're interested in seeing that. I've also talked with our Commissioner Colindres as well, who is a restaurant owner, and he has provided some valuable input over, actually prior to ever starting this process, just in talking about what's going on in downtown and working with different restaurants and things like that. And he's also sort of into the food truck scene and whatnot. So we've worked with that, and I know there's been some discussion at Economic Development Committee as well. So we've tried to put all the feelers out and take into account what we can and incorporate all of that. And then, you know, hopefully people come to council as well and provide their feedback, both for staff and council.
So for the most part, it's been a positive.
It's been a positive because as of now, the city has nothing that allows for food trucks to operate really. So I think folks are generally excited about having food trucks being able to operate and having some guidance for that, since we've received guidance from the state on the street vendors and those folks have been allowed to operate. It's sort of highlighted the need to also address our mobile motorized food vendor folks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so with that, we'll open the public hearing at 6:56. Do we have any written comments or any speakers online?
I have no written comments. Heather, do we have anyone on the line?
No, we do not.
All right, we'll then close the public hearing then at 6:56 and a half. Any further discussion, or I will entertain a motion?
I'll move to approve the
No,
recommend the code chapter 5.72 on food trucks to be forwarded to the city council with the changes or suggestions that we talked about.
Got it.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner Bedoya,
Yes.
Commissioner Black,
Yes.
Chairman Smith.
Yes. No worries. All right, item number 3, discussion of additional planning commissioner seats. So is this just open, or do you have, is
So
there staff?
Nicole is going to give you the staff report on this one.
Sorry, let me switch gears here.
You want me to do it?
It's in here somewhere. All right. So commissioners, discussion of additional planning commissioner seats has been brought forward to the commission with the recommendation from city council. It was brought up in the city council meeting, the idea of adding planning commissioner seats to the commission. Currently, the Beaumont Municipal Code states that the city planning commission shall consist of no less than 5, but no more than 7 members. The topic of this came up after the most recent appointment to the commission. There were a few applications received, and at that point, council wanted to ask the commission their thoughts on adding additional seats in the future. So really, it's just a discussion topic amongst the commission on their thoughts.
All right,
You guys
so
discuss?
before we get to commission, are there any public requests to speak on this item?
I have no written comments. Heather, do we have anyone on the line?
No, we do not.
All right, so comments from the committee. We just go around the table if there's any thoughts. Commissioner Stevens?
I guess my only thought, having 7 is would just give us more input and more variety of suggestions for recommendations, etc. I know we're not in districts here, and my only concern, I guess, would be that my neighbor would be on the planning commission, and each of us have we live, which is nothing against my neighbor, but each of us have our own areas that we drive the most, that we visit the most, and live and visit, and so we all have our own experiences to put in there when considering items. So I know it's unavoidable, but diversity like we have now is I believe is important. And if there's any way to keep that going, then I know it's probably unavoidable. If my neighbor wants to join, they can join. They can put their application in.
That would probably be up to the council to look at all of the different varieties of application and addresses, if that's something they wanted to consider.
Mr. Bedoya?
Having been present at this discussion, I think the biggest concern was the ability of the planning commission to get a quorum. So I think that's, and then at that time there were a lot of applicants and many of them seemed very qualified. So, but I don't really know. This being my second meeting, what the right number is. So, yeah, I don't know. So I don't really want to say whether I agree or not.
Fair enough. Commissioner Black?
I think that I definitely agree with Commissioner Stevens as far as the diversity of the group and getting more input. It would only benefit the city. And I think with the growth of the city, it certainly seems to be a reasonable discussion. I don't know how long the planning committee has been this size, but certainly we've had huge growth. So that might be, it would make sense to have this discussion. I don't see any downsides except for just trying to maintain that diversity and having representation from a variety of areas. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Thank you. Okay, so Councilman White mentioned this to me a while ago, that the code allows for it, and it was something that he was ruminating on. So I've had a little time to think about it. I'm not sure I'm any more clear now than I was when he mentioned it. I think to echo some of the other comments on here, anytime we get a greater diversity of opinion, it's a positive for the city. I do like that idea. I like the idea of with the planning commission not being in districts, that there is the ability to evaluate people on their very, very varying backgrounds, the different levels of political interest, location in the city, yada, yada, yada. There's a number of factors there that I think are able to bring in that diversity. I think overall that's an admirable goal. I will also say that I've been on the commission for 3 terms. I've seen commissioners come and go after a year, 2 years. I've seen times when the commission, we had a couple people drop out unexpectedly. The tenure seems to be a little bit more unpredictable. And sometimes the applications that we got when there was a vacancy, we got 1 applicant for 2 vacancies, and other times we got 7 applicants for 1. And, that's my only concern is that we, if we expand, then, we have to ensure that we're always getting a larger pool of applicants coming in, so we don't end up in a situation where we're a committee of 6. Not that, it's super likely that there'll be a 3-3 tie on a lot of items, but, it is just something to consider is that, while the last batch of applications may have led to some discussion where it's like there's a number of good people that we could put on this commission, is that something that's going to happen over time? I haven't seen that in the past. I think that we've had good commissioners come and go. Like I said, it's there's the benefit of the diversity, and then there's the challenge that comes along with fully staffing the commission and not ending up where we have 7 and then we're stuck with 6 for a while because we're not able to fill that last position. So, like I said, I've had a couple weeks to think about it, and I'm not sure that I have any clearer thought.
I totally agree with you, and I think that if they do choose to move forward with the seventh position, there has to be some kind of a plan B if we can't get that position filled.
Yeah.
For sure.
I have a suggestion
Yes.
that we utilize on committees is council has appointed alternate members, 1 to 2 alternate members, and those positions participate in all of the meetings so that they stay up to date with everything that is happening. They just don't have any voting rights, so that if there is a vacancy, that comes up out of the blue, then we can quickly fill that space from one of the alternates without having to seek applications and
Now, would that
hope that we-
apply if we had 2 alternates tonight and we have an absence? Would one of those alternates be able to?
it would not be in a one-time vacancy, or I'm sorry, one-time absent. It wouldn't be for
A vacancy.
an absent. It would be for a full vacancy.
Got it. Okay.
Just something to think about. The only thing that I thought of with that is compensation, because these seats do have a small compensation. Then you would have to decide whether these alternate seats also get that compensation, that stipend, or if they forego that. So that would just have to be stated ahead of time.
And I think it might be a difficult thing to pull off if they're not, if we expect them to be at the meetings, even if they don't have voting rights. I think it would be a difficult position to fill if there is no compensation. Not that we get paid $1 zillion, but I don't know if there are enough people out there that just volunteer in this type of a situation. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's one of the challenges, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm very much on the fence on this one. I would not be opposed if that is the direction the council wanted to go. Be very happy to welcome additional community members to participate in the community. I think that it may lead to greater challenges down the road. I know we are typically fighting to find candidates for, we have openings right now in, was our Economic Development Committee?
Yes, that
And
was
I
a
know that
recent
we're
one.
generally
Yes.
always trying to fill Administrative Appeals Committee. So, I don't know if there's a way to look at, some of these committee members that apply for Planning Commission and use that as, our bench essentially, that we could pull from somebody who may have been vetted for one of those others to step up, or what it is. I don't know. Like I said, I'm very much on the fence on this one.
Just to put things in perspective is population. City of Riverside has over 300,000 people, 7 council members, I think 9 planning commissioners. County of Riverside Planning has 5 because of the 5 districts, and that represents the entire county. And we're at 47,000 population as of 2019. So it's just kind of something to think about, that of our size, having a larger planning commission, just something to think about versus the larger cities. But not opposed to it. But it's something.
So is we all right? I don't know if that helps you at all.
You'll report back, right?
I have all the notes for Nicole. So, yeah, we'll compile this and Nicole can provide it to council and.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. With that, any community development director comments?
Briefly, reminder of our March 24th Economic Development Committee event with business owners in the downtown at Craft Lounge. It's open forum. Anybody is encouraged to come by and listen to what our downtown business owners are saying. Since Ms. Brzezowski brought up during public comment about the housing element, I'll go ahead and provide commission a brief update on that. I provide an update on the housing element actually every month in the council agenda packet under department reports. So it is available for the public to take a look and see where we're at with things in a general capacity. So we are still in the process of updating the housing element. The state has not shockingly been understaffed and unable to meet their own deadlines as far as document review. So the housing element proper is actually ready for essentially for release and approval. But what happened was back in April of last year, the state released the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, AFFH, new guidelines that had to be complied with. And so that required cities to essentially revamp their entire AFFH component of the housing element and then have those reviewed separately by the state. And so we submitted ours back in August of 2021 and followed up in October of 2021, finally got some comments back and resubmitted and are still waiting for the final blessing on that component so we can finish the housing element. But our safety element update that's part of that is already done. It's been to the CAL FIRE board and has been approved. All of these documents are on the website with their statuses. We have conducted AFFH outreach per the state's direction. That's on the city's website. So we're really just waiting for the state to get our final comments back to us on if everything is acceptable. All the programs are identified and in place. Because the deadline to have it approved or to have the document approved by the state has passed, they have other options. So basically all that means is now instead of having a full 8 years to implement some of the rezoning or other program implementation things that would have to take place, that window has been shortened. And I believe after talking with our consultant about this, we'll actually be able to propose all of that to take place when the housing element is presented for adoption. So we'll still be able to be compliant once the housing element is adopted. So we are working towards that. Again, full transparency, everything is on the website and updates are provided to council on a monthly basis. So if you encounter other questions on that, out with the public or hear of anything, please feel free to send them either to Carol or I, and we'll happily provide the information. We are actively looking for input on AFFH. So if you know anybody in your HOAs or your kids' baseball teams or, anywhere out there, and you would like to encourage them to visit our website and fill out the little survey or look at the letter and email me some comments, we would love to have more community input. So feel free to throw that out there as well.
I was on a presentation with SCAG a couple weeks ago, and I think they mentioned that there's 6 or 8 jurisdictions in the state that haven't approved one.
Yeah.
And everybody else is held up somewhere in the review process.
So of 52 counties and umpteen cities in those counties, it's a handful, is what our consultant said, that has actually been approved by the state. So and not again because their documents aren't getting approved, but just because the backlog is so great. So that's really what it is.
Yeah, that's kind of what the presenter of SCAG was saying as well, is that, get it in so you can get it in line.
Right.
Because there's a line.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's been an interesting process, but.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, and I think we will not have a second meeting this month, and that, I think, concludes my remarks for this evening.
All right. Thank you very much. Any commissioner comments before I adjourn? Adjourn? All right. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting then at 7:14. Thank you.